Morning, hello, this is John again, and I have the later workhouse graveyards in my mind. We went to one last Saturday in Lismore and went to a workhouse in Dunshaughlin in County Meath today, and then yesterday heading home went to a later workhouse graveyard in Kilkenny. And I want to go now and visit the later workhouse. Sorry, no, it's an asylum burial ground in Youghal. So I'm in Youghal now. It's my local town. Saturday morning, made a run to the dump, and now I'm going to head up to the top of the hill. You can see the hill beyond. Youghal is East End, County Cork. The geology that Youghal is built on extends across into County Waterford, and that's where we are in Ardmore. Very much a South Munster geology, which is sandstone hills and limestone valleys. Synclines and anti-synclines. Synclines are the high bits and the anti-synclines are the low bits. The twin geology of that, the sandstone and the limestone, which you'll see here in Youghal, manifests itself as the red and white, the colours, the county colours for Cork. Sometimes called the blood and bandages. But with an archaeological background, I'm more inclined to look at it in terms of the geology. Well, the high part of the hill now that we're heading up to here, we're going to head in towards the old medieval town, and then we're going to skirt up around the back of the town walls, the medieval town walls. Youghal is part of that historic town walls network, and the high back end of that is where the 19th century institutions were put in. They're sometimes workhouses and asylums were built remotely, sometimes cut off by the new railway lines, sometimes cut off by the canals. In this case, they went up as far as they could on the hill, away from the town. And we're going to head up that hill now. It's got a few steep hills. Youghal has. I'm originally Cork City, and we're no strangers to steep hills here, but there's a couple here in Youghal that would challenge anybody. So we went into the North Abbey last week. I just passed that there back behind us, just realised. And now we're coming here to the bottom of Cork Hill. I'm going to turn up there. Harrington's Bakery. Roderick's Hardware on the right. That 19th century streetscape heading down to the medieval town down before us. And now we go up Cork Hill. The British Army barracks was up here on the right, it's mostly gone now. It's a health clinic. We're not going in there, but you can see remnants of the 19th century structure of this place. There's North Abbey, and on the right you can't see it, you just passed the door. So now we're going to head away. Barracks is up there, but now we're going to head away up this side. New housing estates all up back here. Nice big population. Youghal is a great town. Really good people. Am I right? I think so, yeah. I kind of regret now being in second gear. I should have got into first there. Okay, so we're coming up over it now. New houses in there, apartments, that whole new thing we have in Ireland now where they build apartments rather than houses. Then into the preceding housing estates. Now I think in here on the right is where the workhouse was. It's all gone now. I had a look at Google Earth during the week, and you can actually see remnants of the footprint of the workhouse in a couple of the aerial photographs. Saturday morning, GA World ahead of us. Youghal PA, they're out training. So here on the right, there's a green area, and it's in there that I saw the footprint of the back wall of the workhouse. Just turn here now. They're leaving it grow. So this large clear area here now, I'm fairly sure. So it's in there, you can see the foundations. When the ground dries out, you can see the foundations of the workhouse. And it was the back range, the very back wall, usually where there's a mortuary. Now, it's usually, so in there, if imagine a wall where that grass is, and it was the other side of that then, in the northeast corner when we were in Kilkenny yesterday, and the Kilkenny Workhouse, the burials went, how can I show here my finger? Just to the left here, if the equivalent if we were in Kilkenny. And it was the same in Tuam. It was the back, the most private section of the workhouse grounds that they did the famine overwhelmed burials in, we think. And then maybe they might have done it there. I haven't nailed it down yet, but it's also possible, or more likely, that the burials for Youghal Workhouse were down in the town, down in the North Abbey graveyard. So now we're heading over 300 or 400 metres. St. Rayfields is a very well-known medical facility here in Youghal, and we're heading towards that, those big trees in the distance. Looking at the documentation, it looks like the first building in there was an industrial school. Now, it must have been a really big industrial school. Like, it's not, I couldn't find anything out about it this morning when I was at my breakfast. But it became an auxiliary asylum. There was a major political arm wrestle going on between the medical professions and the religious orders. And the Catholic religious bishop got control of the asylum down here, and they got a capitation grant of so much per head that they looked after in here. And the reason I'm going here is that there's a burial ground down the back. It's one of those typical asylum burial grounds. It was deliberately located in a very private location, and on the one hand, the privacy gives it, it's respectful, it's quiet, it's sacred space for the burial of our less fortunate, I suppose. But in the same vein, it's being at the back and being isolated means sometimes they can become neglected, and sometimes they can become pull in here. So what's happened here is that the burial ground is the quickest way to get into it is through the golf course here. You just go through the gate and then you nip around to the right. I'm going to go in there. What I'll do is I'll pause this now and I'll get going again in a minute. Okay, I think I'm now connected to the Sennheiser memory mic, which hopefully is communicating with this camera. I'm after coming through the entrance to the golf course, and now we're going to head over towards the graveyard. Avoid that chap out for a walk. We're heading over there. Those tall trees are pointing us towards the general direction. I don't know why this blinking thing. I have to learn how to use this properly. It's like as if I haven't got the balance right in the gimbal, so I'll be vaguely drunken. Okay, so somebody has cut silage here, I guess. Alright, what do I do? He stays pointing forward. Okay. Up there, top of the hill. If we went up there, we'd be up at St. Rayfields, which was the asylum buildings. Housing estates we were in a minute ago were the workhouses over that direction. And now we come heading over towards this walled burial ground. I thought it was a contender first for having famine burials in it, but I got confused in my head. This is associated with the asylum and not the workhouse. But it's late 19th century, early 20th century actually. There was a controversy about the asylum conversion from an industrial school to an asylum. I suppose they wanted residents, patients from East Cork to be kept in East Cork. It looked like it was a play by the church to control some elements of the medical care here, which you might say on the one hand is intrusive, and on the other hand, you read some historians, they say that it was actually the medical health service was quite a good standard. Okay, so there's a number of headstones here. Nice biodiversity, lovely clover, grasses. So there's modern headstones in there, I won't go looking at them. There's more over beyond. So there's families here in Youghal, I suspect they have family plots here. Everything's facing towards me, so they're all facing east. You can see it's a lovely location. It's in a wee glen running down to the sea. Probably a stream over there. Lovely golf course looking like. And then here we are, just trying to see longer grass. But I was in here a few weeks ago and the grass was cut short. So I'd say it's regularly cut. Excuse the drunken wobbling. Central Memorial here. Last time I called in, the little tablet had broken. Something that we can try and get fixed. There's vetches there. Yarrow, is it? Lovely. So there's a central path that we're standing in. So it divides the whole place into four quadrants. And if they started burying here from 1905 onwards, then that would tally with Portrane, where we were the other day. That was around about then. St. Lomans, which we've done some work in up in Mullingar, that was around about then too. And when you look at this area in the aerial maps, you can see individual graves inside here. And it looks to me like it's east-facing graves. So unlike the workhouse graveyard we were in Kilkenny, where the actual rectangular space was not aligned a square east-west, they buried the people then to respect the alignment of the ground, so they weren't buried east-west, it looks like to me anyway. Whereas here, looking east, and I think we're starting now to see graves in here, yeah. Graves running off, pointing that direction. As I scan down below me, are we seeing the same thing? Are we seeing the same thing? Look for the darker flushes. I think that's what's working for us, catching our eye. Look for the darker flushes. Swifts, swallows, no swallows. What are hedgerow birds? And look at this section, yeah. So I think we're seeing graves in here and there and beyond. The darker flushes in the hollows. Self-heal. Golfers. differential vegetation growth, and I would just be guessing that that's tied in with graves. If we walk up here now, thicker growth pathway. The pathway there is the higher drier ground. The drier ground is usually because there's gravel underneath and the vegetation isn't growing as well. I changed my boots coming in because the grass is sodden. Deeper. Alright. Actually, so we're seeing kind of deeper flushes. There. So the graves are going to run perpendicular to us. I think that's what we're seeing there now. So for instance there. That's our grave there, that's one grave. So what I find with the graveyards, very often if you get your eye in on one row, so here now, there's a row of graves running in that direction. So the next row is here, and then the next row is there, and there, and there. I mentioned that in a 20th century cemetery, very often the burial space was, what was it, 4.5 foot by 7 foot. That allowed you to fit in a grave cut and then have grave banks as well. So the uncut ground was the banks. So if you divide a place up into 4.5 foot by 7 foot, how many rows can you get then? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's somewhere between 5 and 6 rows here in this quadrant. It'll be the same there, they all look about the same size. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So between 13 in a row. Very often we're estimating how many burials we have in a medieval graveyard or how many in an older graveyard. I'll count the numbers of rows, then I'll count the numbers of headstones in a row, the average, and then I'll multiply them up. So in this case, what do we get? We got about 7 by about 12. So I don't know, there's between 100 and 150 grave spaces in each quadrant here. You can see that the two southern ones here do have headstones in them. So probably what happened is later on that maybe it was later on burials that weren't relating to the asylum started in here, and then families have continued with that. I mean, you couldn't, what a fantastic place to be buried. Nice boundary wall, broken in places, so there's a small bit of a conservation challenge on that, but that could be fixed. I think I've seen the odd sign of young people gathering up here. I think it can be a very private, quiet place, so maybe around here you'd be getting parties and so on. No sign of it here now today, so that's good. Lovely place. Lovely place. Sad. Like, one way of looking at the workhouses, certainly in the 1890s and for a while thereabouts, that was part of a good health system. Like, we associated in our heads with, oh, they were in the workhouse and the famine and all that, but by time the system had evolved 30 years after the famine, and like I said, some of the historians describe it as being a high quality health system, comparatively anyway. So Angela Gallagher said something last night on social media. She was saying how she liked the series, and and she mentioned that she had a relative potentially buried in Eden Derry workhouse burial ground. And God, she reminded me, Angela reminded me, sure, my great grandmother was buried in one. Or sorry, we thought she might be buried in the workhouse burial ground because she died in the workhouse 105 years ago in Roscrea. But as far as my dad knows and my cousin Robert, they actually brought her home to be buried in the family plot. So a lot of families in Ireland will have associations with these type of burial grounds relating to an asylum or to a workhouse. In some cases we'll have grave markers. You'd wonder if those are concrete. Yeah. So potentially these little concrete grave markers that you're seeing down there and over there and so on and here, these two, maybe they were all over the place here. I find it very hard to believe that the common sense approach that we have in Ireland and the kind of approach that we have to respect for burial and Christian practice of burial wouldn't involve grave markers. So the question is, could we find concrete grave markers under the grass over there? Are there more around here? Would they have unique identifiers on them, numbers and so on? Because they're the anonymous dead now, maybe they weren't when they were buried. If they're in an asylum, I can't see that they put their names on them. It was more complex socially. Oh, they've put in, look, that's what's after happening. They're after putting in cameras here. So that's a protection, you know, one of these anti-vandalism type things. So that's quite good. And there's, oh yeah, they're putting in power there. So there you see how modern institutions react to the care of places like this in terms of increasing the vigilance on the place. In a good way, not a negative vigilance. I mean, yeah, I don't mind young people having parties, bush drinking, that kind of thing. Maybe not appropriate in a graveyard. Definitely not appropriate in a cemetery or a burial ground. Yeah, so that's what that camera is all about. Oh, and there's a speaker as well. I presume they can talk to them. So there must be a contract out and somebody can say, oh yeah, you in the blue hoodie. All right, so that's a recent addition here. But in terms of trying to work out what's going on in terms of burials, I think now when you relax the eye and you start to see the darker regular spacing of different vegetation, different groups of plants, that we're seeing graves in there. The graves are running that way, which means the rows are running straight up there. So and I'm saying about 7 rows there. Okay, here we go now again. So like I said earlier, you get one strong row and you get your eye in. And what I'm seeing here now is grave, 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 grave. And then, so the next row then is there. So they will reveal themselves. And in terms of how we manage these places in this era of climate change, then I love the biodiversity that's here. This is more akin to a meadow, and I think this is more appropriate. It's more peaceful, it's more restful. There's those stone crosses I was talking about. So it's painted concrete with a bit of iron, reinforced iron inside in it. So I wonder, have we old photographs that will show them all over the place? Okay. All right, Asylum Graveyard, Youghal lands in Youghal. It was relating to the auxiliary asylum, which was straight up from us there, and in use over 100 years now, and nice quiet space. Glad to see the security camera there. I think that'll protect it a wee bit more. And when I started and I was talking about red sandstone, you can tell you're on a red sandstone hill when the walls are made out of red sandstone. You see that lovely, that's the blood. That's the blood on the cork bandages. Here's an old concrete gate. The gate needs to be closed off. For a burial ground, you need walls and you need gates that close to stop dogs going in and so on. It's one of the challenges you get in an urban graveyard. People need to bring their dogs for a walk. The dogs are part of our world as well. But a gate then at the graveyard entrance will stop the dogs from going in there. What a place. It's really lovely. And when you're buried inside in those burial grounds, you're buried in sacred space for people who have that faith in the Christian faith. Consecrated ground. Just because there's no crosses there today doesn't mean there weren't crosses in the past. Maybe there weren't, but it doesn't. You can't say that. That's what we learn in archaeology. The evidence has to be, you have to take on board the consideration that things change over time, and you have to allow that things might be more complex than we think. And you need to do research, you need to talk to the local historians, you need to read the old books, you need to try and find old photographs. Do all that, and then you'll have a better understanding of your place, and then you can come to the conclusions and you can debate the issues, or these people respectfully treated in their death. Okay, so I'll finish up there. Across the week, last Saturday we were in Lismore, that was a workhouse graveyard. This Saturday we're in Youghal, that's an asylum graveyard. Individual graves are identifiable, and when it's an institutional burial and they tend to be burying people in the space 1 a month, 2 a month, you end up with a regular system then, where if Biddy gets buried this week, then Johnny gets buried alongside her the following week. And they tend to actually have a drawn map planning the use of the burial spaces before they start burying. Now, very often those maps and associated burial registers don't survive. The archives, for various reasons, tend to dissipate. And in the few cases where we do have them, they show a highly organised system, a very common sense approach. When that breaks down, it's an interesting question. Why does it break down? Okay, I'm going to go past the Quaker graveyard now, which is now a golf green, which to me sounds odd. I'm half lost. I'm going to say goodbye. Okay, Slanish.